Dr. Mandir, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Dr. Mandir?
Perfect, loud and clear. Mr.
Oh,
Sridhar, how are you?
excellent. I mean, first of all, I mentioned, I'm not sure whether you were available online when I mentioned, but it is my duty to mention again, Dr. Mandir, you have been greatly instrumental in putting this show together. And I must thank you from me, Helen, and the rest of my team for helping us, providing us the guidance needed at places where we were a bit stumbling, and it takes a great man like you to be helping us, and I thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much for your generous words, Mr. Sridhar, and the Helen also to be in.
Secondly, I need to start off again with an apology. We ran a bit late. I know it was going to be delayed by 10 minutes for you. It's taken a bit more than 10 minutes. My apologies to you. My apologies to the audience and attendees. We just got carried away with Dr. Rao and Dr. Manish, but Dr. Manish had to leave, and he had told us in advance. Got carried away. My apologies. We will try our best to come back to.
But the apologies, really, it's worth to delay the conference because the insights that we are getting from Mr. Matten and Professor Rao was amazing. It really
absolutely, absolutely. To me personally, as a person, as a lay person, it was truly eye-opening in very many ways. I know Dr. Rao has been talking about self-destruction for a long time, self-liquidation for a long time, but he really pinned it right now.
Perfect. If I may request, I'm trying to share the screen from mine, but it is saying that host a disabled participant screen sharing. So if I may be, because I'm having a PPT to run.
Absolutely, not at all.
You can just allow me to share the screen so that
of course. I'm a bit technically challenged. I mean, I need to ask a colleague, my team over here, to take care of it. That won't take much time. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah, please carry on. Even I shared the PPT to your team also, if we can do the from their side, but it's always good to run it from my side.
No worries. Just give me a second. Let me try and see.
Okay, they made me the host, I guess. Okay, now it's fine. I think I'm in a position to share the stream.
Absolutely.
Can you see the screen up right there?
Yes, of course. Pretty much, yes. If you can just, yeah, and you can put it up. Excellent, excellent. It looks perfect. Super. Carry on, sir.
Perfect. Should I start the conversation or like?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Dr. Mandir.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Sridhar. First of all, let me outsetly thank you and Helen to having me here. And it's a big thing for Impact Global to do this kind of a virtual HR summit, first of its kind in India. And I'm truly grateful to you and your team, and it's been really a pleasure to be part of it, Mr. Sridhar.
It is our honor, Dr. Mandir.
Yeah, so if I may, when I was talking about and when I've been requested to talk about on the summit, so I thought, like, what should be the better time to talk about when the HR is passing through a really tough time. And when I was hearing the deliberations from Dr. Manish, John Matten, and our own Dr. T.V. Rao, so when John was talking about the diverse and the traits of the leaders which is prevailing in the world, so I was thinking into my mind that what is the difference between a leader and a great leader? So if I may sum up, and what I perceive the difference between a leader and a great leader is to leader takes people where they want to go, but a great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be. So this is the role which we are expecting from our own HR leaders and the industry leaders to ponder upon during this amid crisis. So today I would like to argue about the role of HR amid this COVID-19 crisis. We all know that we are passing through a kind of a very it's completely catastrophic behavior which is prevailing into the world, and the entire world is suffering. If we talk about the data, as of now, more than 18 million people have been affected due to this coronavirus, and almost the global population is directly or indirectly suffering with respect to this pandemic. But I must admit at the same time, if you go in the history, it has not happened for the first time when we are going through any kind of a crisis. If you go back and turn the pages of the history, so starting from the, just a century back, we faced the Spanish flu in 1980, followed by the World War I and followed by the World War II. We have faced the Y2K challenges, the global economic recession in 2008, and the rise and fall of ISIS. So as I mentioned, it is not happening for the first time that we are facing through any crisis. But at the same time, having said that, it's also the evident that the numbers of people are suffering from this crisis really kind of a very critical. So if I talk about the pandemic and if I talk about the learnings, what we have achieved from this pandemic is like the foremost thing for me on a personal note is the sense of homogeneity. When we are talking about the sense of homogeneity, it means especially in the context of India, when we are unlocking in the unlocking phase and we have had the lockdown for almost 3 months. So now we are in unlocked stage where the people during the lockdown has lived, starting from the wealthiest men in India to the common men like us, have lived with the same sense of living beings and the living essentials. So if I go back into my life, so what were we living before this pandemic? Is like we were enjoying the sheer luxury. So it has made us thought that the how to live with a kind of a minimum essential and do our living with still the better prospect. When we are talking about the HR, the role of HR in the current crisis during the organization, we all know the each and every organization globally is passing through a very kind of a tough time where the organization are facing the liquidity crunch, they are suffering with the operation cost, and they are also suffering how to intact their human resources and to get best out of them. So these are the common concerns of the organization which is prevailing out of the world. When I would like to argue about, when we are talking about any crisis, when we are talking about any divergent thing which is happening in the world, especially in the context of the current crisis, each catastrophe comes with a two divergent aspects. You can see on the screen that there are two divergent and a quite contradictory aspects which are prevailing in the world. One aspect, when we are talking about any crisis, it's come from a menace. When we are talking about the danger, we are talking about the danger and the consequences. We are talking about the fear which is right prevailing there at the ground level. But at the same time, by having all those challenges in place on the ground level, we should also be looking at the prospect part, the opportunity part. Someone has very rightly said that we should never waste a good crisis, and this is the situation in which we are as of now. The more big the crisis is, the better the opportunity are lying for the humankind, and that is the topic which I would like to ponder upon today. How we may leverage the presence of a crisis and embrace the opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, most of the organizations are suffering from the business to run their business operations and how they can leverage the optimal performance from the human resources, whether they are working in a manufacturing sector or they are working in a service sector. For both of them, it's really hard for them to get their human resources to the optimal level and get the best out of them. Recently, I wrote an article regarding the crisis principle. So whenever we are talking about the crisis, or especially the health crisis like this, and whenever any one of us suffering from any kind of a symptom or a disease, we go to the doctor and doctor says, what are the symptoms? So if I may sum up this crisis into the medical language, I would say that the disease is the COVID-19, as we are all aware, the patients and everyone, because everyone is like vulnerable to this infection, and stay home, stay safe is the only strategy which can prevail us to get infected, and one is to adhere to that. So when we are talking about crisis principle, I recently wrote one article on that, and when we are talking about crisis principle, I have defined and I have bifurcated the situation into three core kind of ratios, if I would say. The deep panic mode is the first stage which I would rate upon, the stunning mode and the creating one. When we're talking about one by one deep panic mode, so most of the organization, when the human resources are working in the organization, but they really don't know which way to go, they really don't know what to do, they are completely being stuck in this new kind of a abnormal situation, and those I would rate that the 10% of the human resources are into that zone, and getting know what should be done. When we are talking about the second aspect of it is the stunned mode. It's kind of a majority of the workforce are lying between this zone where they are not so clear regarding the upcoming part, and they are not so clear regarding the upcoming way path, but at the same time they are in a transition from a new abnormal part to the new normal part. So they are into the transition, and they are trying to get what the new abnormal is all about, and what are the ways and means of it, and they are like in the ideal situation. If I may ponder upon the third and most important aspect of this crisis principle is the creative mode, where as a Maslow's hierarchy, we need to learn with any kind of challenges. And indeed, this type of human resources prevailing within the organization are most creative and most kind of a diverse species, I would say, in the field of human nature. And these type of group have understood the veracity of the world, and they try to cope up with this, and they are trying to find a solution for that. And that is the most important human resources zone where the HR should look at when working within the organization. So when I touch upon the history again, when we are talking about when something is new is coming, and so in the 1600 AD, when Galileo invented or researched that the earth is not round, the earth is not square, it's round, because there was a belief during that time that earth is square and there is a river peripheral the earth is moving, and it gets into the waterfall and there is the end of the earth. But it was not the case when Galileo came up with the theory that the earth is round and it is moving within the periphery of the sun. That is a different fact that he have been hanged death due to this theory by inventing this theory. But when we believe, then there is an end of anything, there is a beginning of a new thing, and we must comprehend this type of thing, that when anything is new is happening, and what should be the new ways to do it. When I talked about the crisis principle and talk about the creative mode, where the majority of the minority of the human resources are lying. So being an HR practitioner for more than a 1.5 decade, I must admit that what we should be doing is we should target those 10% of the groups in the organization, and can take and can do the benchmarking for all those employees who are falling under the 80% criteria and the 10% who are there in the panic mode. So for any HR, it's becoming really critical to address and identify those 10% of the people within the organization, and how they can set the benchmark for the same. I would like to talk about if being an HR practitioner, if there is a dilemma prevailing in any of the HR practitioner among us, that being a like learned designated HR and being kind of a studied so hard and doing the n number of things for the organization, if you alone in silos will be able to do and do the transformation within the organization, that I don't think that theory can help, because no HR professional can work alone without the concern from their CXOs, their CEOs, and the top management. Because until and unless there is a kind of a unwritten ground rules that one has to take into the confidence to the entire top gamut of their organization, and then one would be in a better position to transform the organization, especially during this amid crisis. So being an HR practitioner, I would suggest, or rather I would argue, that there are two main grillings which the HR practitioner should be ponder upon in the interest of the organization. So the first grilling, what I would suggest is what should HR be doing today? What is the role of HR in the current crisis? And the first and foremost thing which came into my mind is to recalibrate the HR processes. When I'm talking about the recalibrate the HR process, it doesn't mean that doing the layoff, doing the retrenchment. And I also would like to quote Mr. Tata, who just a week back requested all the organization not to do any kind of a retrenchment or a layoff within your organization. So to reduce or recalibrate the processes is not right to do the layoff, and retrenchment is not the only solution to it. But when I'm considering this recalibration of the HR processes, I'm talking about the implement the best work practices to the organization, like the 5 years, the Kaizens, then the lean, how you can shrink the SOPs, how you can shrink your policies, how you can shrink your functions. And that is the best way to do the recalibration, by applying the theories of lean, 5S, and Kaizen, as I said earlier. And by doing this, you can be able to reduce the operating cost within your organization. The second thing I would like to talk about, the wage dispersion ratio. The wage dispersion ratio, if I may simply initiate in the form, that the wage dispersion ratio is all about, if you go to the data, even in the Indian MNCs and the global MNCs, there is a huge kind of a dispersion or kind of a disparity between the salary and wage standard of the CEOs or the CXO to the level of the lowest paid worker. And to the research, there is a difference of more than 500 times difference is the salary of the CXO and the lowest paid worker. So in the current time, and the Japan is the best example to work upon this, because in Japan, the average difference between these two ratio is not more than 25 times. So we need to learn a lot how we can reduce this kind of a dispersion ratio between the highest paid CXO to the lowest paid worker. And I think the Gini coefficient method is the right thing to ponder upon, where you can actually calibrate the difference between these two. And by this way, we can also reduce the operating costs within the organization. In the context of India, the third thing I would like to talk about is India is not so great as far as the per capita GDP in comparison with the world and the so-called developed economies. But as far as the per capita opinion rate of India is pretty much high. So in the current timings, we should be focusing on the fact-based approach. Whatever is coming in front of us, within the organization, one is to look their respective matter with the kind of eyeglass, and one is to only believe with data. Data is the new all as of now. Data is the new network as of now, and data is everything. So one is to be really rely upon the data, and whatever the data said, one is to go with the data with the sense of kind of wisdom, and how you can read the data and what is the data said, what is the truth behind the data. One is to ponder upon that very greatly. The fourth thing I would like to talk about is how the insinuation takes the place. So when we are talking about, we all know the incident of Titanic, when how much time the strategy is taking, when the eye keeper was being informed that the iceberg is there in the middle of the sea and one is to take the turn from that. So that is majority when the organizations are really large in nature. Many times what is happening is when the top management defines the strategy, but at the same time when it reaches to the ground level, when it reaches to the lowest affected people, it is like it's of no use. So one is to be agile enough, how you can communicate your strategy, how you can communicate the kind of execution what you are supposed to do to the groundest level with a rapid speed. And that is the critical part, by getting the stakeholders confidence and doing the right thing for them. The last thing what HR should be doing today is the focus on the employee engagement. So one is to be vigilant enough while having the engagement from their employees, whether the employees are really in line with the organization goals and the organization objective, whether they are really in tune and in the same page. So I think that is the kind of a five things which I would like to quote when what HR should be doing today. The second thing I would like to talk about, what HR should be preparing, how HR should be preparing their organization for the future needs. And this is also critical because we are talking about the current time and we should also be targeting the future. So there's also a thin line in between, that how to attune the productivity and production. So majority of time, especially when you are working in the manufacturing organization like us, it's always good to get the best out of productivity out from the human capital, because when we are talking about this current crisis, the productivity matters rather than the production, because we are struggling with the line of orders, we are struggling with the demands. So it is the right time to ponder upon how we can leverage the productivity and how we can get best out of the employees. The second thing I would like to talk about is the re-energize the workforce. The law of the vital few is also applicable in the current timing, when 20% of your human resources are claiming the 80% of the productivity of the organization. So there is a right time to identify those star performance within the organization and how you can retain those star performance during that bad time, because it's really a critical thing for them to retain, because each of the organization is facing the same thing. And how the third thing I would like to talk about, one can affirm the culture of care, because the first thing when we are coming to the workplace, it's like doing the sanitization of the entire place where the one is working. So health and safety, the well-being part is far more important. That has never been important. So that has never been so important in the current crisis. So when we are talking about the requirement of the current situation, the ongoing disruptions is like it's really demanding. The business is become really demanding, and this entire gamut, the HR transformation is becoming really vital. And how we can leverage the veracity of the human capabilities, as Professor T.V. Rao was talking about the human resource volunteers, it's become really important, and it is giving a new edge to the future. So in the end, I won't take much time. I just would like to give some recommendation that it is not important that what should be doing, how we should be doing. And even Mr. Matten was talking about that whatever we are doing, one should be agile enough and vigilant enough that how one should be doing the things and why we are doing is. So in the current crisis, one is, it's really important that if you really want to achieve an extraordinary thing, it is really important that you pursue the extraordinary. It's because we are living in extraordinary times, and it is no matter that what you do that sets you apart from others, but how you do what you do makes a difference. And how one can put the HR transformation right and how we can move that transformation and leads to a glittering opportunity. And there is a great dilemma within the organization, because when any organization is competing with their fellow organization in the same sector, they always do the map assessment, kind of a benchmarking what others are doing. So rather than focusing on what others are doing, it is really important right now to find some new ways and means of the doing the same thing, because it's completely unknown to us, and we all are sailing into a very kind of uncharted territories and doing the things which we have not done so far. And the last thing what I would like to talk about is how we can do and use and leverage the kind of existence of the new tools, but because it's pretty much proven that we can't solve the pediatric problems with the geriatric solutions. And this is the time where one is required to do their own job, because most of the time what is happening is the people are doing the job 2 to 3 levels down what others are doing. So if you can't do the job above your one level, but at least you are expected to do your job, and one has to be kind of pretty much optimistic to do that, and with minimizing the operational part. Because if you are getting into the micro level things, if you are getting into the minimization and doing the micro level thing, then you are not justifying your role as a HR leader. And that's the reason why we are talking about HR as a strategic business partner. And that's how we leverage the presence of HR, because I really believe, and it's my sheer belief, that to create value, HR has to see the entire organization through their CEO's eyes. So one has not be restricted their portfolio to the HR operations, but one has to look really wide and clear that what their CXOs are doing, how they are pursuing their organization, and that's how we are changing the behavior of the leadership and adopting the new and good things. So in the end, I just want to tell you about that we are living in a time where HR should not be there on the board's agenda. It's quite contradictory, but the second line, what I would have talked about, it is the only agenda to the times when HR leads change for all the organizations. And that's how HR is being expected to work as a true leader in this current crisis. Thank you very much for having me here once again. And I'm requesting Mr. Sridhar if is having any kind of a question which I can answer to, and I would be happy to do that. Thank you very much, sir.
Great. Dr. Mandir, thank you so much for your presentation. I mean, a lot of your focus was on HR transforming its function and on trying to see what HR professionals can do in terms of navigating the current crisis, if I were to put it. I know it's an often repeated word, but what is it that CEOs can do to the HR professionals to be able to support or help? Because they are in a bit of a quandary at this point in time. I mean, the CEOs focus more on the business and the bottom line, even today, because companies have to survive, people have to survive. The HR professionals per se have too many hats to wear, too many roles to play. So what do you think is an advice that you would give as an HR human capital officer, chief human capital officer, to chief executive officer or a chief finance officer?
Actually, it's other way around what you asked, Mr. Sridhar, because it's being generally seen that the CHROs are being advised from the CEOs and the top management what should be doing, but technically it has to be other way around.
Right.
Like the CHROs in a better position to talk about their actual concerns of the human resources while coming to the workplace, and they are in the best position. That might be the reason most of the CHROs becoming the CEOs nowadays. because they understand the actual pain of the human resources and how to get best out of the human resource and do the optimal person. But if I would say that if one or two advice I may give upon to the CXOs who are part of this summit. So first and foremost is the sense of kind of create the value. So until and unless HR is not creating the business case in their respective organization, it will be really difficult for them to be the actual strategic partner. And since it's been perceived so long that HR cannot be a strategic partner, or it's kind of an operational role where one should restrict it to, but it's my deep recommendations to the CXOs who are hearing that please allow your CHROs to give the enough space for them where they can also contribute in the interest of the organization. And ultimately, it's all about getting into the new world, Mr. Sridhar.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. That's a great recommendation. Of course, we have in the fraternity tried to do this very many times, but I do hope there is a patient here waiting on the CXO's part to be able to listen to what the people who manage people have to say. Thank you so much, Dr. Mandir, for your presentation and your insights and your actionable steps that we tend to try and focus on in this conference. And we've come into this field saying we would like to attempt at changing the way conferences are run. And this is our first attempt, and I hopefully with everybody's support, we should be able to make great strides in it. Thank you so much. Just before you go, I just have a small request, if you don't mind. We have given, because we wanted to share the screen, we've given you the host privileges. Would you mind giving it back to me so that I can get Stotts online, who's been so kindly waiting for us, if you don't mind?
Okay, so let me try that out. And
no worries. If you just hover over my picture or my video that you see and you see 3 dots, you click that and click make host.
Perfect. Perfect, Said.
Thank you. Appreciate your help. Thank you so very much.
Indeed, it's a pleasure, and thanks for having me. Happy Raksha Bandhan, and good luck for your conference. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.